No, okay. I won't read the contested case hearing.
Okay.
But I will take introductions and roll call of the voting members. So by understanding the voting members, we'll start. So how come we didn't make you a voting member? Lynn is a voting member?
No, so.
Don't confuse me, don't confuse me. I'm easily
It's in
confused.
the statute, it's just
Okay,
written into
okay,
the
okay,
statute.
okay.
Yeah.
But she is an instrumental part of our council. But the voting members are those that are, as you say, provided by statute. So I'm gonna start with Tammy.
Yes, hello everyone. Tammy Lee, Deputy Director at the Department of Transportation.
I am again Don Chang with the Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture.
And then we have the University of Hawaii. Is that Anya? Yeah. Oh, Kathy Ho.
Present. I'm taking this meeting by Zoom and no one else is in the room.
Okay. And then Mary Alice.
Mary Alice Evans, present. No one else is in the room. I'm representing the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism.
So, and then do I have someone from the University of Hawaii?
Chair, there's no one from University of Hawaii attending today.
Okay. Tell them the next time they are going to have to bring snacks. Since they didn't appear at the last meeting.
Noted.
I suspect they're not going to bring very good snacks, so maybe we won't have them. But thank you very much. So we do have a quorum of the voting members. We do have an agenda, and we will follow the agenda. It is also posted on our website. So the first order of business is approval of the minutes from August 17th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of August 17th, 2022?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you very much. A motion has been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 17th, 2022. Anybody from the public here to provide comments? I don't see any hands up. And I think, oh, yes, Lori.
I'm here to provide comments, but I think after the presentation or on the agenda item, I would like to
Yes.
put it, okay,
Okay, no, yeah, we're gonna
thank
We're
you.
going to provide everybody an opportunity to provide comments on specific agenda items. So we'll take that a little out of order. So all in favor of the approval of August 17, 2022, please say aye.
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 And I know in our other boards, Chelsea, if it's the first motion by the board, we do a roll call. We're not as formal and yes, okay. I have to remember to shift my hats. Land board, we're very formal. So, okay, the minutes of August 17th, 2022 have been approved. We also have as on the agenda, approval of the minutes of October 20th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Kathy,
Second.
did I hear you saying a second? Thank you, Kathy.
Second.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes of October 20th, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposition? Thank you. Minutes of both of August 2022 have been approved. We're now going to, as part of our agenda, voting council members, if you could do a brief introductions of yourself, since we've got essentially a new board. So Tammy, pretend you're Ed Smithson.
No.
A short introduction there.
I can't do a short introduction and I'll need some more time, but for myself, I'm a licensed attorney. I've been working for the Department of Transportation for 16 years. The last 4 years, I was the Highways Administrative Services Officer. And of course, now I'm Deputy Director. A little bit about, I guess, I first met Chelsea about a month ago. I didn't know this council, so I'm excited that we're part of it. I think for the DOT, we want to be part of the solution always. I think what we're interested in is, taking some more training to identify invasive species and also to learn about this is real specific, but an overall plan to address biofouling. I just got introduced to the term, so I don't know too much about it. I'm interested in learning some more and how we can come to the table and iron out solutions. But yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much.
Sharon,
Did you want to?
Sure. Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture. Previous history was, I am not an attorney, probably the only one on the table. Previously, I was with Delta Airlines for 25 years. And I preface that to say I had a short stint with the Department of Transportation, just very short. But the Invasive Species Council serves such an important purpose. Even with Delta Airlines, everything I've done in my past career kind of like, is involved with biosecurity. Coming up, we have people in the room here who know about FESPAC happening in June 2024. Biosecurity is very, very important for that event. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Sharon. Mary Alice?
Thank you. Mary Alice Evans. I'm a planner, not an attorney. I've worked for the state for many years in a variety of different positions, and currently the interim director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, which is an attached agency to the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. And I have served on the HISC in several previous years, and we have supported its mission to the best of our ability with our limited capacity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mary Alice. Kathy?
Hi, Kathy Ho. I'm the Deputy Director for Environmental Health. I come to this position by way of the Attorney General's office, where I was an environmental attorney for a few years. The Department of Health's mission is to protect public health and the environment, and HISC has been part of our protection of the public health. It supported us in suppressing vector-borne diseases like Wolbachia. It has provided us with grant money and expertise in many aspects of our work in vector control. HISC has also provided us with equipment and supplies, and we are happy to collaborate and collaborate with HISC. I see it coming into the future that for me, climate change is a big, important issue. And vector-borne illnesses, I think, is part of it. And I see us working together with HISC and all the other members of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'll just, full disclosure, I actually, how many years ago? 2000 and so I was part of the team that worked with DOA, DLNR, and DOH on putting together the biosecurity plan. So it gives me great pleasure to be sitting sort of on this side of the table now, seeing the implementation of the biosecurity plan. And yes, Darcy and I and Christy Martin, we were at numerous public meetings together on the development of the biosecurity plan, including talking about biofouling. So it is with great pleasure to be sitting in this seat and again, working with all of you on the implementation of the biosecurity plan. As I think all of us at that time, and we continue to believe, biosecurity is critical to Hawaii given our isolation, but it is more cost effective if we can work on preventing invasives versus waiting until we're trying to manage. By that time, it is really too late, too costly. So I appreciate just the collaboration of everybody that's on the HISC team and the staff that have put this together. So with that, we are not the only members of this HISC committee. So I would like us to go around and let the other members of his also introduce themselves. Then we'll start with you, Senator Decoy.
Hi, Senator Decoy, I represent Senate District 7, which is Mulukai Lamai, all upcountry East Maui, Kolave and Moakini. And I'm very honored and privileged to sit here. As most of you know, we have had our challenges with invasive species that have actually hurt our endangered species. Most of the areas that I represent are isolated, rural, everything from axis deer problems that we're having to pests that have been introduced by the state has wreaked havoc on many of our native fine birds. So I'm really interested and happy to be sitting here because I think that there's a lot of things that we need to bring to light to many of our constituents. Not just my constituents, more so my colleagues that have just literally rolled over their heads about how we need to fund and combat that and support the biosecurity measures. Just last week, I was spending some time in South Africa and we looked at many of their practices that they've done there. When you look at third world country stuffs, they have some of their things in order, and at the same time, many of the things that they are doing have hurt the system there. So it was very enlightening for me to be educated while I was supposed to be on somewhat vacation. To like my family, kind of. But so just happy to be here and I look forward to working with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator.
My name is Lisa Martin. I represent
Yes.
Waimanalo and Kailua here on Oahu. And I have a nonprofit that does native forestry. And in order to plant those native trees, we have to remove a lot of invasive species. And so I spend a lot of time dealing with invasive species firsthand. But also in my district, we have the Hawaii Ant Lab. And we have farmers who are very interested in combating coconut rhinoceros beetle because they don't want it to become widespread there. And very unfortunately, we have a very persistent infestation of coqui frogs in Waimanalo that we have not been able to get rid of. And so, yeah, I am very convinced of the importance of dealing with invasive species as early as we can because it only gets harder and more costly the more we wait.
Thank you for being here. So I also have on Zoom.
We have Representative
Lowen.
Ebslin.
Yeah.
Representative Lowen.
Okay, Representative Lowen.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. Great to see new members excited to tackle these issues coming together. I represent a district on the Big Island where we have brought you guys little fire ants and Rapidohia, all kinds of great things. So just trying to balance some of that out and do what I can. But no, it's obviously a hugely important issue to address, a big and difficult one. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I also have, it's Representative Ebslin.
Yep. Hello, I'm Luke Ebslin. I represent District 16 on Kauai, which is Wailua, Lihue, Kapaya, Hanamalu, Omau, and Hui. And I live about a mile from where a coconut rhinoceros beetle was discovered or found on Kauai about 2 weeks ago. And here we're facing a lot of impacts from feral cats. And actually yesterday I just spent the day with the folks from the Kauai Forest Board Recovery Project hiking out to the Mohihi Trail to try and see the last of the remaining akikiki in the wild here, that they're being devastated from mosquitoes. And on the way out there, we saw numerous dead birds just lying on the trail up upon it. It's pretty devastating, and the forest was mostly silent due to what has been a banner year for mosquitoes up there. So it was a pretty sobering trip, and I'm happy to be on this council with you folks.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I have, is it Meg? Are you representing Senator Gabbard?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much. Senator Gabbard represents District 21, which is in West Oahu, and has been the Ag and Environment Chair since 2000, well, for 7 years. and has been on the HIS committee since its formation. So happy to be here and take back any information I can to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Meg. Are there other members? Okay, all right. Thank you for the introductions. The next item on the agenda is submittal number 1, review of previously adopted recommendations and resolutions that are relevant to future actions taken by the council. Chelsea.
Aloha Council members and members of the public. My name is Chelsea Arnott and I'm with Department of Land and Natural Resources and Program Support for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. I just wanted to give a big mahalo for all of you coming to the meeting today, both in person and virtually, and for colleagues and members of the public that came out to attend, and just the continued support we've seen on the council and on different invasive species initiatives. Probably what you've seen for this first meeting of the year is a lot of housekeeping items. We have a relatively new council that's coming in this year. And so we just wanted to make sure that our council members are aware that we have in the past submitted and approved resolutions through the council that support different invasive species issues and just show a coordinated effort on different topics. Those approved resolutions are all posted to our website, and I have sent a link to our council members to go through and review those resolutions. I'm actually just going to read what is in the background for this submittal so I don't miss any points. But as we know, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council is an interdepartmental collaboration comprised of the Departments of Land and Natural Resources, Agriculture, Health, Transportation, Business, Economic Development, and the University of Hawaii. The HISC was established in 2003 by Hawaii Revised Statute 194. And this is in response to a Legislative Reference Bureau study in 2002 that identified the need to address a number of gaps in invasive species management statewide. So the way that the council fulfills its purpose, which is providing policy level direction, coordination, and planning amongst state departments, and also with federal agencies and international local initiatives for preventing and control of invasive species, is by issuing resolutions. We put together plans. We strategically disperse funds to enhance invasive species prevention, control, and outreach and research. And the council provides direction to the HISC support staff to carry out council directives. And our HISC support staff is currently comprised of 4 members. There's myself as the coordinator of the program support. We have a planner, Jack Reef, who's sitting over here. And online, we have Elizabeth Spieth, who runs our 643pest.org hotline website for pest reporting. We have Chuck Chimera, and he runs the Hawaii Pacific Weed Risk Assessment. And we have Layla Kaufman, who is our projects and research coordinator. She spends a lot of her time coordinating the operations at ports of entry for pest monitoring. And I said 4, but that's 5, including myself. So our HISC support staff carries out a lot of the duties and tasks on behalf of the council. And so the HISC is housed within the Department of Land and Natural Resources. This is part of the statute that I referenced before. And these positions are within the Division of Forestry and Wildlife, and also non-civil service University of Hawaii with our Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit. So these are RCUH positions that provide the technical support. The council is co-chaired by the Departments of Land and Natural Resources and Agriculture, both of whom were confirmed during the 2023 legislative session, so congratulations. The council also has new representation from our Department of Transportation and 3 new legislative members. So as such, it's important to make the current council aware of previously adopted HISC resolutions that may be referenced or utilized to show the state's position or coordination on a particular invasive species issue or topic. I have included some examples of past resolutions that are relevant to current events. This includes Resolution 21-1. This is supporting the planning, construction, and operation of Pacific regional biocontrol facilities in Hawaii and community agency engagement. And then Resolution 19-2, this is supporting the keeping of pet cats indoors and the use of peer-reviewed science in pursuing the humane mitigation of the impacts of feral cats on wildlife and people. And that resolution has been referenced in recent events that have been taking place on Hawaii Island. And again, in this meeting packet, in this submittal, the full list of adopted HISC resolutions can be found at that link. And also on January 27th, 2021, this council meeting was to delegate authority to HISC support staff to track legislative members' draft written oral testimony and provide comments in legislative hearings or other documents or forums relevant to invasive species that are in line with plans or strategies that have previously been adopted by the council. So this could include the 2017-2027 Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan and the HISC CGAP's 2025 Joint Strategy. This authority allows HISC to fulfill its mandate on policy level direction through the submission of comments and testimony on invasive species related issues. Often these issues come up with a small window to respond and immediate action is necessary. The approved recommendation is in accordance with Office of Information Practices document on Sunshine Law options to address state legislative issues and measures, which offers multiple solutions to allow boards to submit comments or testimony without being subject to Sunshine Law requirements that may prevent timely submission. So apologies for reading that entire background, but it's easiest to keep myself on track. So with that, the recommendations for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council is to delegate authority for HISC support staff to continue review previously adopted resolutions and present those to the council that need amending and or other updates at a future council meeting. And the second recommendation is agree to the authority granted to the HISC support staff in the January 27th, 2021 submittal requesting council approval to delegate to the Hawaii Invasive Species Council support program staff the authority to track legislative measures, provide in the council's name written and or oral testimony, and provide comments in legislative hearings. This is a very long title, I apologize. And requesting that the council delegates to the HISC program support staff the authority to draft and provide in the council's name. I think I am repeating myself. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chair Chang for questions from yourselves or the public.
Thank you very much. Council members, do you have any questions or comments for staff? Anybody on Zoom? Anybody members there? Okay. Any members of the public have any comments or questions related to staff's presentation and recommendations? Okay, with that being said, oh, Lori, yes, come on in. Introduce yourself.
Come on. So I wasn't sure, Chelsea, what you're asking for? The submittal 1 and 2. Sorry, Laurie Buchanan, Molokai Maui Invasive Species Committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. Maybe I just wanted to check, Chelsea, what you was asking the council to do.
So it's submittal 1, and these are, I would say they're housekeeping issues. So with the new council, we're making them aware that we have previously approved and adopted resolutions. And the first recommendation is asking the council to allow program support staff to review these past resolutions and flag any amendments or updates that may be needed to these resolutions. And we would bring those before the council for approval and integration of any amendments to past resolutions so they can stay current with issues and the council's opinions and views.
Because you're not acting independent of the council.
No.
But rather just to reaffirm the resolutions that have already been adopted and.
Yes, yes. So that's the first recommendation. And then the second recommendation is we delegating authority to the HISC support staff that would allow them to submit written or oral testimony or documentation that needs to be done in a timely manner, as long as it's in line with previously approved plans by the council. So that the two plans we reference are the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan and also the HISC-CGAPS joint strategy. And some examples of this are submitting HISC-specific testimony at legislative session for specific issues. Sometimes it takes a long time to get approval from our council. So, and you need to have turnover within 48 hours. So it's allowing that authority for HISC staff, as long as it's in line with those previously approved plans, to submit that on behalf of the council as needed.
Okay, that's good. Thank you then I guess I submitting testimony on the agenda item in support
Okay.
of the submittals. And then Madam Chair, also asking if you have comments later, if comments from the public will be allowed later.
Yes, of course.
Okay,
If you
thank you.
Yep, if you want to add anything additional, did you want to provide specific comments on these two recommendations, or as you said,
On the biosecurity plan.
okay. So that's the one that's on our agenda item?
Mhm.
Yep, number 7.
Okay.
Is that the one that you want to specifically provide comments
I
on?
can, it's in general, not specific to the, what Chelsea is proposing,
Okay,
but to the biosecurity plan in general.
okay, we'll hold that one until that item
Okay.
comes up.
Thank you so
Laura.
much.
No, thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes,
I have a question. So is there a fine line of submitting testimony as staff? And then wearing a different hat and submitting testimony on a different level, but they're claiming I'm still staff submitting testimony. Where do you guys draw the line?
So just to clarify, and thanks for the question, are you speaking maybe in my role where I am a DLNR employee and we submit testimony on behalf of the department on certain issues? And then we could also submit testimony on behalf of the council as HISC support staff. So this is something that maybe we could discuss further. We've actually haven't been submitting HISC specific testimony for the past few years because we've been in a transition with the coordinator position, and it's just a lot of work to draft 2 testimonies.
and maybe if, Senator, if I can kind of chime in.
Mhm.
For purposes of the deal in our chair, I don't think all testimony from the department comes through the chair. So no staff submits any testimony as a staff member. But if you want to submit something in your independent as a member of the public, you're free to do so. But the only representation on behalf of the department comes through the deal and our chairperson that's kind of vetted out through our own internal process. And then HISC, like other administrative agencies, like other agencies administratively attached to DLNR, we recognize some independence. So DLNR and HISC at times sort of like DLNR and like Kirk, or DLNR and the Climate Commission may submit 2 separate testimonies. So DLNR may have a testimony, and then the commission or the council may have a separate testimony if we take different positions, or we may both support the same position, but we come from a different perspective. So I'm hoping that kind of addresses some of the questions.
Kind of, so I guess what I'm asking is that if you're at a meeting and an agenda item is on file security, and in your capacity as staff submitting testimony, right? In other words, I'm employed by Department of Forestry and Wildlife and submitting testimony in opposition of whatever, maybe hunting, I don't know. And then they turn around and they go, you know, I'm gonna take my hat off. And now I'm submitting this as a resident.
Okay.
Is there a line between how you guys are gonna justify? Do you wear the hat of his staff member the whole time? Or are you gonna allow for the flipping of I can take my hat off at any time and dump another testimony? So I just wanna be really clear because we see that all the time. So I just like to know where the employee, state employee or county employee is coming from while you're giving authority to say, according to this resolution, that you guys are, you know what I mean? Because you can just like throw a whole monkey wrench in this if that's the case. So just like clear about that. What message we send back to the public when you're gonna have other people say on crowd, whoa, let's go resolution on this table. And to like identify or do we you guys identify that no, you cannot submit it outside no longer as a community or resident or such as that.
That's a really interesting question. I appreciate that. I mean, I think we can, in my mind, that's also, I guess, would be one you'd want to consult with also the Ethics Commission. But I mean, I think if you are going to submit testimony as a member of the public, but you're an employee, I would suspect that you might even have to take vacation time to submit personal testimony. You cannot do that on time as an employee. So I think you'd have to document that you took vacation time and you are submitting that, and you have to introduce yourself as Don Chang individual, not in any official capacity. And so I think the line has to be very clear so that you're right, that the public knows which hat you're wearing. Because I think for purposes of like the deal and testimony only comes from one person in the department, and that would be the chairperson. Or in the case of the council, it may come from the co-chairs. But I would see that Chelsea would, on behalf of the chairs or the commission, but not on her own behalf. So yeah, that's how I would see that.
So you guys would draft something for, because an employee might not know that. You know, an employee might say, oh, you know, I realize I gotta do this, but I never realized the department never tell me I have to take time off to submit testimony as personal. You know what I'm saying? I mean, with everything going on, I guess it, you know, ethical, whether it's ethical or not. It's kind of.
Yeah, because I think we're supposed to, I know that we are required to take training. We're required to take ethics training. Is staff also required when you get hired? Okay, so, and I guess you can be counseled if the matter comes up. It's a fair question to ask them if they're testifying before a legislative body, you know, what's your capacity? And so I think that is a fair question. Yeah, no, it's a hard one. Wow. No, you are absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. So, do you have any other comments or public testimony from members on the Zoom? Okay. With that being said, I think there are two. Is this an action item, Chelsea? The two recommendations. So staff's recommendations are have been outlined as the two different bullet points. Delegates authority to his support staff to review previously adopted, and then agrees to the authority granted to the HIS support staff. I mean, I do want to make another clarifying point. We are anticipating having quarterly meetings, right? Well, how often do we meet?
So by the statute, all we need to do is have 2 meetings per year. There doesn't need to be a specified time in between those meetings. One meeting I can say happens every year is approval of the fiscal year HIS budget. That usually happens in August, but then meetings are assigned as matters and issues come up on behalf of the council that we need to have convene a meeting. Yes.
And we may want to schedule a meeting before legislative session. So it's very clear that staff knows the position of the council as you're going into the legislative session.
Yes,
Okay,
we can do that.
Okay. So with that being said, do I have a motion to approve the recommendations by staff on these 2 specific items? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Motion moved. Seconded, Kathy, Ho, is that, did I hear you? Second?
Yes, seconded.
I thought I heard you second the motion. Thank you
You
very
did.
much. Okay, so motion has been moved and seconded to approve staff's recommendations regarding the HIS council and those 2 bullet points. All in favor? Say aye. Any opposed? The motion has passed. Mahalo, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is number 6. Presentation revitalizing action on 2017-2027 Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan. Is that you, Chelsea?
Yes, mahalo. And I'm gonna ask my colleague from Department of Agriculture to come up. Let me get
Aloha, good to see you.
Aloha, Darcy Oishi, Acting Manager, Plant Pest Control Branch at the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
And then attending virtually, our co-presenter with the University of Hawaii Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit, Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. We have Christy Martin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Aloha, you did a great job. Just so exciting to be with you, this new council. Christy Martin, University of Hawaii Pacific Cooperative Studies Unit, Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species, or CGAPS. Aloha.
Thank you so much. So we're here to present on submittal number 2, agenda item number 7, requesting support and engagement to conduct an update of the actions outlined in the 2017-2027 Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan.
Excuse me.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
sorry. I was looking at, is this separate from number 6 on the agenda?
This is a presentation that will go over the background that's provided in agenda item 7, submittal 2. And apologies, I guess I changed the name. We'll make a note of that in our meeting minutes and make sure that's corrected when we post it to our, or clarified when we post the minutes to our website.
Okay, and we're a little flexible in this group. If I had a deputy AG sitting next to me, they probably would say, no, you gotta be consistent. But
take a break, I'm gonna change the title. But this presentation will be going over the information that is provided in submittal number 2. So we'll get started with what we're going to be discussing today. We'll provide some information on invasive species here in Hawaii, the need for statewide coordination and planning, and providing an overview of the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan, which we know Chair Ching is very familiar with from the planning process. We'll talk about, the vision of biosecurity in 2027, where we are at, so progress so far, and then talking about the need to review and assess and reprioritize actions at this time. And then we will review the council recommendations that are included in submittal number 2. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christy Martin to take us into an overview about invasive species in Hawaii. And you just tell me next when you're ready to move on.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to present today, and thanks to Chelsea for organizing. my background is outreach, and so I always hate to get to the end of a wonderful discussion and somebody says, really, what are invasive species? So please pardon me. I'm going to start with the definition. And instead of using some of those that we hear, sort of in the news or in the paper, I'm going to go straight to the federal executive order that was published in 2016. And that is, invasive species is defined as a non-native organism whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human, animal, or plant health. Now, that definition has shifted a little bit over the years. The first executive order in 1977, and then the second executive order in 1999. I mean, there's a lot of definitions. This is the one that is being used across the country. So we're going to stick with that. So in Hawaii, some background information just to get us all on the same page. You folks know these points, but because this is being recorded and available on YouTube, I'm going to go over some of these points. On islands, invasive species is the primary driver of biodiversity loss. Rare and even abundant native species are being lost because of invasive species. Damage to ecosystem functions is happening because of invasive species. And that means that forests are impacting watersheds, carbon sequestration and cooling. And it's affecting corals, and which is impacting habitat and habitat for species, as well as coastal protection. And we're seeing a loss of pollination services. These are what ecosystem functions are, right? The forests are just there to produce air and water. Coral reefs are they're there for habitat and food. And when invasive species come in, they impact all of those services that ecosystems provide. They are impacting and harming agriculture, and this affects everybody, right? Underserved and vulnerable communities are having a harder time growing food in their backyard or purchasing them in stores. They're also impacting major agricultural industries. We've got the largest citrus producers in the state, or in the nation here in our state. We're also the producer for seed potatoes. So invasive species are harming those capacities. They impact public health. I'm so happy to see you on this council, Deputy Ho. They directly harm us. Species like box jellyfish directly sting us. And the diseases carried around and spread by mosquitoes and snails and slugs are impacting public health. There's a wildfire risk from invasive grasses. They impact cultural practices. They degrade cultural sites, and they cause a loss to native species. And this impacts our ability to use those species for cultural practices. They cause economic harm. Little fire ants alone cost $200 million annually on Hawaii Island. And of course, we know they're spreading to other islands and impacting us across the state. A projection for brown tree snakes, if they were to arrive in Hawaii, is projected at 2.14 billion annually. That's B, if they were to arrive. And those include costs to infrastructure damages. Those tree snakes are spanning power lines and shorting systems. That's an infrastructure damage. And to Director Ho's point, climate change and invasive species have synergies. With climate change, invasive species are actually getting worse, and there's changes that we need to pay attention to. There's a rise in vector-borne diseases that is going to occur with a warming climate. And so controlling invasive species is the most important and available resilience strategy that we have. We need to make our forests and our oceans resilient. And one of the best things we can do is to protect them from invasive species, new ones coming in, as well as the impacts of ones that are already here. Slide, please. And so, what's the framework we have in Hawaii? Let me just bring everybody up to speed. We're going to go through a little bit of a timeline. There's international frameworks for regulating and preventing the movement. There are federal and state agencies that also have authorities related to some of these issues, whether they be health or they be transportation or agriculture or environmental. So we have a patchwork of policies, and between those policies, we can have gaps. And some of the structures we have in Hawaii have been formed to fill gaps. I'll just go through a few of those. So in 1991, there were island-based Millstone Action Committees, or MACs, that began to form to address Myconia. Watershed partnerships also began to form on each island, because when you have a fence to protect a watershed, it needs to go across multiple properties, and you can only do that through a partnership. In 1994, there was a multi-agency alien species action plan that has the delightful acronym ASAP that was developed. And the group that planned that and drafted that document formalized as CGAPS, Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species, to facilitate and catalyze action. In 1999, those Millstone committees began to transition to invasive species committees on each island to fill multi-taxa early detection and rapid response gaps. Lori Buchanan in the room is the coordinator for the Molokai Maui Invasive Species Committee. Also that same year, the National Invasive Species Council formed. We had a lot of organizing here before the National Council formed. Congratulations. In 2003, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council was formed. And I believe we are the fourth in the nation to form a statewide council. So we were really early adopters of this strategy. And that same year, the first aquatic invasive species team, marine aquatic invasive species team, was formed in Hawaii, first in the nation. In 2008, Hawaii Department of Agriculture saw we needed some capacity on ants. Ants are really crazy, strange creatures, and they require some dedicated information and resources. So the Hawaii Ant Lab was created in partnership with the university. In 2015, we participated and have a section in the Regional Biosecurity Plan for Micronesia and Hawaii. And of course, the topic of this presentation is going to be the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan, or HIBP. So that's where we are in so much of our gap filling work. And Chelsea, I'm going to turn it over back to you.
Thanks so much, Christy, for that history. So just continuing with our definitions, just so we can lay the foundation for this conversation and when we talk about the biosecurity plan. So, I mean, what is biosecurity? It's the set of measures taken to manage the risk from invasive species to the economy, environment, and health and lifestyle of the people. So effective biosecurity requires a comprehensive approach that includes these different program areas. We start with pre-border, which is preventing invasive species from making their way to Hawaii. An example of this is the brown tree snake dog program led by the US Department of Agriculture over in Guam. Like Christy said, brown tree snakes are a devastating species. They're established over in Guam. Of course, we have a lot of military transit between our two islands. So this pest coming to Hawaii is a huge risk. And so this dog program in Guam is helping prevent brown tree snakes from arriving here in Hawaii by having these dogs sniff around cargo, military ships, military planes, and other commodities that could be coming into Hawaii. Border, so inspecting incoming items to ensure minimal risk of pest entry into the state. And that also includes monitoring efforts. This is a picture of coconut rhinoceros beetle traps over at the airports, which we have a program that monitors for this pest at all the state airports. And then we have post-border. So this is detecting and responding to new incursions of invasive species and controlling established invasive species wherever possible. Christy mentioned the Island Invasive Species Committees that do a lot of this work in the Hawaii Ant Lab for managing little fire ant. But this also includes the use of natural enemies to control widespread high impact weeds like Myconia, which is an invasive tree that we have on all the main Hawaiian islands. And what you see here is a picture of a natural enemy, the Myconia caterpillar, that will really give us a chance at better managing this really highly invasive tree. And major gaps and weaknesses, so looking at biosecurity prior to 2017, and I'll pass it over to Darcy, who, you know, he was there. He was there.
Thank you.
No.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the big gaps that we've been seeing is still staffing. The biosecurity plan across the board had ambitious goals in terms of moving staffing forward. In part, some of our difficulties we've encountered have state processes, but also signs of the time. COVID and the global pandemic and the resulting deletion of a lot of vacant positions resulted in negative growth where we wanted positive growth. So as an example, branch capacity on every island is compromised. I'm down from 9 entomologists at the time of the authoring of the biosecurity plan and its acceptance to 5. And entomologists are not the easiest to replace. And you know, we've had challenges across the board. We have inspector positions in plant quarantine that are almost impossible to fill, not because of qualified applicants, but because they can't afford to live in the locations where the positions are. So we have issues like this. We have policy issues concerning ballast water and biofouling. Inspection of non-agricultural commodities are a persistent problem. This is what we call the freights of all kinds, and our legislators are familiar with freights of all kinds. Maybe we don't spell it out as such, but freights of all kinds are a mechanism to move not just invasive species, but other illicit items. Funding, a lot of us are soft funded. We've had shrinking federal grants, particularly within the plant industry division. We have not been able to leverage federal grants. Part of that is because you need a certain level of infrastructure available to you in order to leverage federal funding. And despite particularly our HISC representatives from the legislature, we understand we only get 1.4% of the budget between DLNR and HDOA. And I know everyone would want to see that number to grow, but it's hard to grow that number, particularly with all the challenges that are set before us on a routine basis. And of course, facilities. We need transitional, we move forward on transitional inspection facilities, but there are other facility needs. Statewide biocontrol facilities to move programs forward. Not mentioned here are facilities there's a changing national standard for canines. So our working dogs are gonna need better housing and accommodations. And I will, maybe most of you are not aware, but the first AC cars in state fleet were for plant quarantines canines, even though they couldn't drive. So that's just some of our major gaps and weaknesses.
Yeah, thanks so much, Darcy. And those gaps and weaknesses were across the state departments that had to deal with invasive species issues. So in 2017, the Hawaii Department of Agriculture launched the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan. It's comprehensive in scope, it's collaborative and multidisciplinary in approach, and it identifies 147 action items across a 10-year timeline. So when we fast forward and we look at the end of implementation of this plan in 2027, a lot of the gaps that Darcy just highlighted are the things that we want to see solutions to in 2027. So having more risk assessments and electronic manifesting, that's really going to help us identify where to focus our inspections and our monitoring efforts. Regulation of ballast water and biofouling, which Christy is going to talk a little bit more about in detail. And thank you, Tammy, for mentioning that earlier. Having those inspection facilities, doubling inspection staff for both imports and inter-island shipments, increasing field capacity at Department of Land and Natural Resources and Department of Health, and finding stabilized funding for the island invasive species committees that I'll really have to every year apply for new funding year after year. And Darcy mentioned we would have this fabulous biocontrol facility to house his program and introduce new natural enemies to control some of those high impact, widespread invasive species. And having more new outreach tools, new videos and other ways of engaging the community and the public about biosecurity and invasive species. So let's look at where we are in 2023. So progress on implementation, and Darcy made me aware he doesn't like this graph, which is fair enough, but I use this graph because it really highlights how we've been tracking the status of the actions in the biosecurity plan. So as we stand in January 2023, implementation for 68% of the actions has started. So that's 68% of the 147 action items identified in the biosecurity plan. And that sounds pretty good, right? At 6 years into implementation, we're over halfway there with implementation. And what you can see here is the different project areas that we discussed earlier with the inclusion of public awareness, because early on, everybody really understood the need for community engagement and public awareness when it comes to biosecurity. Then we have post-border, border, and pre-border. The green section of this graph shows those actions that are completed, ongoing in perpetuity. The blue is working towards completion, and the gray is those actions that have not yet started. They need to be reevaluated, or they're being requested to be removed. So these are the ones we're going to go into a little bit more detail and some examples of those types of actions. But we have made really great progress. One of the most recent, sorry, these are kind of overlapping, but one of the most recent actions is the implementation of biosecurity messaging at our airports. Both our chairs here today were able to attend the launch of that, and there's a biosecurity display at the new terminal at the Honolulu International Airport, which is really fun and interactive, and that was designed by Bishop Museum and a coordinating group on alien pest species, which is a really great tool to use for those visitors and residents that are coming in and out of our islands. Setting up compliance agreements. Department of Agriculture did this early on with Christmas trees, right? Those can be huge sources of pests coming into the islands. And so they worked with the Oregon Department of Agriculture on setting up compliance agreements and making sure there was an added process to treating those trees before they come into Hawaii, on top of their own inspections when they come in. And of course, we implemented a state-of-the-art pest notification and reporting system. That's the 643pest.org. And then, of course, we have the phone-in number 643-PEST, which has been huge for having our early detection and rapid response. So where are we headed? When we look at the progress over time, these colors look similar right now as I'm looking at them, but you can see there's a slightly green bar on the lower side, and you can see the implementation of the plan starting there around July 2017. And we had a really great start with implementing actions at the launch of the plan. But what has happened over time is we're starting to taper off. And we're starting to see that line, just very little increments of moving progress on the plan, and starting to see our implementation start to decrease over time here. And this really brings us into what we're here today to ask of the council, is the need to review and update actions. And this is, to preface this, we are noting that there was an intensive planning process that went into identifying those 147 action items for the biosecurity plan that took on our department's input, our federal agencies, stakeholders, industry, members of the public, and our partner program. So we're really not looking at just throwing out everything in the plan. At 6 years here, we're really looking at how can we make that graph start going up again and really make sure we're implementing those actions and we have that commitment behind it and we can see that uptick once again move up, and that we're making sure we're focusing our efforts on those actions that are really relevant still to improving biosecurity in Hawaii. So these are a couple of the items we're flagging here to do review and updates. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each of these. So one of the first things we're looking at is structural changes to improve the flow and communications. And that's internally within departments, but also amongst our different departments. So creating broader headings for similar actions. If anybody's looked at the biosecurity plan actions, I mean, it is really comprehensive. They are very, very detailed actions. So one of the examples we pulled out is electronic manifesting. And maybe Darcy, since this is a Department of Agriculture action, if you kind of want to talk to that.
So electronic manifesting is really one portion of the risk continuum. So we have a whole pathway of related topics, all relating to risk assessment, risk evaluation, and subsequent action on how you respond to risk. So we have featured within various points in the biosecurity plan, various topics on electronic manifest. And you actually have to go hunting for it. I mean, this is where Chelsea has this wonderful Excel sheet, and the reason it's wonderful is you have this search function, because that's what you need to find all the instances where electronic manifesting is. So grouping them for a legislator, for instance, that is particularly interested in electronic manifesting, and makes it for easier communication. It helps us move the dial forward if we can, if we're no longer hunting through 140 some odd tasks to find the tasks that we need to be keeping track of.
You're not suggesting eliminating, it's just categorizing them in more appropriate.
More logical groupings. I mean, we have these pre-pro 1.1, pre-TIFs. You know, I'm saying it in this terms, like theoretically I should know this. I was part of the developmental team, but it's cumbersome.
More user friendly.
Yeah, it's a user interface upgrade.
Okay, that's clear.
That's funny.
And also something that can be included under these structural changes is, you know, reprioritizing, recommitting, adding new agency leads. This is all in that table in the biosecurity plan. It lists which agency, or sometimes there's multiple agencies, would take the lead on implementing a certain action. And currently, the only state departments that are listed as lead agencies are the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture, Health, and the University of Hawaii. I think there is an opportunity here for our other council member departments to play a role in the plan, because tourism and ports of entry, I mean, these are major critical points of biosecurity.
And we've been seeing issues like this pop up this legislative session and some of our discussions outside of the legislative session. For instance, declaration forms.
Yes.
Both DBED and Department of Transportation have vested interest in moving declaration forms forward into the 21st century.
Yes.
Another item is reviewing of individual actions. And this is where our status updates come into play, those different categories. So some actions are labeled as ongoing and perpetuity, meaning they really have no end date, or these are just things that have to continue on into the future, working towards completion. And that status update could have happened back in 2017, but there really hasn't been any additional action to move that forward. Or they just haven't started yet. No implementation has started. So some of these actions, we really need to sit down with our lead departments and create roadmaps. And some of them need to be pared down to re-identify the goals and objectives, or other actions have occurred that have impacted the original understanding of how to achieve the overall objective. And I know that sounds really confusing. So I'm going to hand it over to Christy to provide an example with our ballast water biofouling actions in the plan.
Thank you. I'm going to flag also, those actions that are ongoing and need to be ongoing. An example of that is the invasive species committees, the Hawaii Ant Lab, watershed partnerships. We hope that they continue because they continue to fill gaps, but yet we've got no way to make sure that they're ticked off every single year, that they're communicated as an annual priority. So just wanted to note that we need to put our heads together to figure that out. Getting to some of the actions that need to be re-strategized while keeping the intent of the priority is the tasks, the 17 actions that are related to the ballast water and biofouling issue. We developed the interagency biosecurity plan to be announced in 2017. And then the federal government actually passed the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act that will preempt state regulation of these two major vectors or pathways for invasive species to enter Hawaii and spread. And so, so we need to re-strategize and figure out how we can still meet the intent of that, even with the passage of this federal law in 2018.
Thank you, Christy. Moving on, another status update is need reevaluation. So these are actions, they might need language changes, they might need additional information or additional actions to help move them towards those goals. So one action we flagged is pre-border process 3.1, setting up cooperative agreements with e-commerce to stop the sale of harmful species to Hawaii. This was a great one that Darcy flagged.
Yeah, and we got into a lot of details when this one was set up. And sometimes the details, sometimes the devil is in the details, and sometimes our worst enemy is in the details, because we can't make progress because the goal in this particular case is to stop e-commerce sites from bringing in regulated species. It doesn't matter necessarily how the department achieves it, as long as we can move forward on accomplishing that goal. So, so we're locked into a process now where it's in process when we've accomplished some significant aspects of this already through our communications with these e-commerce retailers. It's not perfect, but the pathway, it's a functional accomplishment, just not the accomplishment as specified within the biosecurity plan.
That's sort of like an adaptive management approach.
Yes. Yeah.
But it includes CITES too, right?
Yeah, I mean, when we identified some of these things as an issue, there was a learning process as we tackle and address the issue, what can and can't be accomplished. Sometimes we're actually limited by our statutory authority. Sometimes there's a gap within our rules. Sometimes there's actually an information gap in just who we're supposed to be contacting and how we should be contacting them. As we tackle these issues, then some of the things that we dictated within the biosecurity plan and the structure and the detail were basically limiting, and we've made more progress than is indicated on the plan because of how we conceive to address the problem in 2015 and 16 during our consultative processes.
And then there are actions that are no longer relevant or have been flagged as no longer relevant by those department leads. And these are actions that are flagged as no longer relevant because they might not be necessary for enhancing Hawaii's biosecurity anymore, for one reason or another. So one of the actions that are flagged with this status update is Post-Border Policy 2.1. And this action talks about legislation and regulation to restructure the HISC as the Hawaii Invasive Species Authority, an autonomous interagency body to manage and administer biosecurity programs. And there actually was a push right at the launch of the plan in 2017 during that legislative session, and a bill was submitted to change the authority of the Hawaii Invasive Species Council, and it would leave the Hawaii Invasive Species Authority under the administration of the Department of Agriculture. And early on, that bill died. And after, in the next year, there was a conversation that this really wasn't a necessary action. The council functions with Hawaii Revised Statute 194. And I just made a silly thing. That's what it would look like with the A. So also improving tracking and communication on implementation. So again, as we've been referencing some of the actions, pre-poll 1.2, pre-border, 3.3, this doesn't translate well when not only internally within our departments, but also when we're talking and communicating with our policymakers, decision makers, the public, and leadership. So talking about how we're going to communicate on the plan and track our implementation and improving that in the future. And we can do this through utilizing partner networks and expertise. We've already started conversations with Hawaii Green Growth, and that group does manage large amounts of data, and they currently track the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and also manage the Aloha Plus dashboard, which the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan and its implementation is one of the tracking measures for invasive species progress. We also put together our 5-year strategy for HISC and CGAPs in support of the Hawaii Interagency Biosecurity Plan. So we did a planning process with our invasive species network and looked at the actions in the biosecurity plan and looked at, hey, what are the most pressing actions and strategies we want to focus on in the next 5 years with our different partner networks and agencies. And lastly, recommitting agency leadership and staff. There's a lot of new staff at our state departments. There's a lot of new leadership. So it's a matter of educating them on the biosecurity plan and those actions. And for some of us that were there during that planning process, it's a good refresher. 147 action items, right? Not all of us are going to remember every single one and what applies to our agency. So having these conversations and doing this review of the biosecurity plan is a really helpful exercise to communicating again with those department leads on the actions and ultimately the objectives and goals that we're trying to achieve through this plan and reaching 2027. So with that, our submittal recommendations, I'll just leave them up here and I'll pass it back over to Chair for any questions.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate the presentation, Chelsea, Christy, and Darcy. Very comprehensive. So council members, do you have any specific questions for staff before I open it to the public?
Yeah, we do have a copy of this policy.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions? Those on the screen, Mary Alice, Kathy, Representative Lowen, Representative Evelyn, or Represent,
Meg.
Senator
Meg,
Gabbard's
yeah.
office. Yeah, Meg.
Sure,
Yes.
I got a question.
Yeah.
So the beginning of the presentation on the biosecurity part, Darcy spoke about the staff. Like every year we go to staffing and we have issues with retaining, once we get the retaining of it. What are you guys looking at trying to do differently in the presentation of how you retain with staffing, inspectors? Because 8 years ago, this what was brought up to every department. Is that if you guys can have come before the committees, the money committees, it was to take a position that, in this case, how to retain inspectors maybe in the mainland. And to bring it before the money committees, because the state becomes a stepping stone, right? And it's like, okay, we'll get in, and then private businesses take them. So have you folks to today brought in a comparable salary rate? An inspector making the kind of money elsewhere to say, here, this is what an inspector makes that has been retained by that state or private business. Because we defeat the purpose of hiring a mediocre, right? And then saying, oh, we lost our staff. Till we gotta put the frosting on the cake. And we haven't done that. And in every department, they haven't done that. I have not seen any department to today bring that to the money committee. The only thing that comes to my committee is, I want to retain them. So, to me, you guys mindset now has to be, okay, it's a comparable, this is what they're making, so we're gonna retain them. We have to pay this somehow, because if not, we're sitting there like sitting ducks saying, oh, losing employees. Every business is losing employees to other businesses that has gravy up the pot, yeah. Because we will never be able to address biosecurity, never, until we can get the staffing under control.
Yeah. We address this on a regular basis, sorry to Darcy, but I think all the state agencies have been with Be Heard and suggested many solutions, right? Specifically for the higher skilled, I think non-BU13 were good. The unskilled, young, not unskilled, but when you don't need a college degree, those positions are not difficult to fill. Difficult, but not too difficult. It's the professionals, right? And to your point, Senator, it will always be a difficult challenge. We raise it, private sector raises it. We raise it, private sector raises it. We cannot compete with the private sector. So there has to be something else that we offer that is motivating to that individual. Because an entomologist is golden worldwide. We're not only competing with private sector here, in the world they want entomologists. So I guess I don't know what the solution is, but money may not be it.
So I guess the simple solution is ask the person that leaving you, what is it they want?
Okay, we can do that.
That's the simple solution is, what will it take for me to keep you here? Because we cannot answer your question for you in your department. Our job is to look at what you're presenting and for us to fund it so that we can address that. Because if we don't do biosecurity, we'll never be able to prevent what fire ants, what cocky frogs, what coconut rhinoceros beetle is with us. I mean, I know we going just like idle, literally idle, or we're gonna say, you guys serious about biosecurity or not? So if you're leaving my company, I will be the first to say, why are you leaving and what will it keep for you to stay here?
So I can tell you, one of my entomologists that left, she left during the pandemic, afraid of the writing on the wall in terms of the budgetary situation, but she got a position, less responsibility, shorter drive time, working for another state that has offices here in Hawaii. with a significant bump in pay. What she doesn't have is higher chances for promotion and moving up. It would probably have been comparable here with HDOA. But hey, if she's getting paid significantly more for less responsibility, for a shorter drive time, and actually quite superior benefits, it's wins across the board for her.
So it's for you guys to find that loophole,
Yeah.
not us to answer your question.
Yeah, yeah.
Ours
So
would be of funding.
yeah, and
So you weren't there. Sharon was there when we had the convention for the Cattlemen's Association of the Island. Lieutenant Governor went out there. And what Lieutenant Governor had told the entire conference was this. Every year, and she gave Brian Miyamoto a ripping he never forget. You guys come to the legislature and you guys piecemeal everything, and you guys do one stop leak and go, you know what, we gotta do this. There's no plan of 5, 10, 15. Okay, and they have in all these years within the Department of Ag,
That's true.
never have. At that time, Sharon, Chair Heard goes like this. I'm not being the director.
No, I didn't say that, but yes.
She said that. She said, you know what, I'm not being a director because I know what to do. And of course I looked at her and goes, you're gonna be nuts. Never said it to her, but you're gonna be nuts. But literally, because she's been working internally, you know that.
yes.
But there was no plan, not one prior director before, got one credible plan in saying, if all these components are here, this is gonna take us. So threw my eggs in a basket. And said, you know what,
Good basket.
come over on plan that going to get buy-in, because right now we just in steps.
Yes.
Let's go. And the biosecurity is trying everything with agriculture. Right? You know that. So it's gotta come over a plan, and that's why I'm kind of glad that we're sitting here and that Albert Martin is here because she's really passionate about it. So if you guys can come with a plan and the presentation can be one simple card to say, yeah, da 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 da, click the link, da da da. Because half of us over there is ADD. Half of us, you're gonna lose our train of thought and you're gonna end up with like everybody in all different directions. And that's where everybody is in all different directions. Because we number one plan that pops.
I don't know if I have a plan that pops.
And we visual, so gotta do visually. Do visually. Too much words, I mean, just picture. Yeah, this bug does all this. This, what is another bug you guys get in Big Island? Because all the problems come from Big Island, and I think the sweet trailer. The one they're taking on all of grass.
Oh, two-line
Spittlebug.
spittlebug.
The spittlebug. The spittlebug was so slow for move on. You remember?
Yes,
Oh,
I
let's-
remember.
Let's just watch it. Well, look what happened now when we watch it, and we didn't have one action plan. So I just trying to say, like, there's a spittlebug one day, 30 days later, how many acres we took out? Choke yeah. And then what came behind them? Fireweed.
All the weeds.
Fireweed all over Maui area. So everything from Big Island is brushing all the way down, and then Kauai just flushes it out in the ocean with all the rain. But you know, like the kind of pictures, you guys gotta show the picture. Like people don't read, they look at pictures. You know, so I mean,
I have a, I wonder if you folks have looked at, for the harder to fill expert positions, looking at growing our own, like having scholarships with UH, if they kind of like we do for teachers and stuff, if they work so many years in the department. I understand that people will be free eventually. We can't, have indentured servants. They would be free to move on. But if we produce enough of them, especially people with local ties, we might saturate the market. So there aren't so many jobs for entomologists.
UH is looking at that to model after the military model, where you pay for medical, pay for med school, pay for all the skills, pay for, ETOC or whatever it is that you need, and then you indenture them maybe for 3 years, and they might choose to stay. So there's that in the works on the CTAR side.
I think at DLNR, we're doing something a little different. Because we have such a unique mission to preserve and protect natural and cultural resources, I think we can be a little more flexible. So, and actually, some of this came out of that Molokai meeting we had with Kamalo, when the community said, "Yeah, how come you don't hire our people?" So one, we're trying to look at, I've challenged my staff and our HR. We have to change the MQs so that we are giving equivalent, we're giving parity to Indigenous knowledge to someone who's got a degree. Because a lot of this work is, if we can make working in forestry, working in the water, a marketable skill where you can actually make a living off of it. But we start training them here. But when we give the young people, we give them a path towards employment, one, so we can keep them to work here, but a path towards employment and an economic livelihood where if you come, if we will recognize that land-based connection to place, the Indigenous knowledge, the connections your ohana have, you were taught by Kupuna, that has to bring on value to someone who comes with a degree from Idaho or someplace, so that we are giving them, we're creating again parity, so that they can begin to we will hire them, create job opportunities here in the department, then they can begin to start moving up into higher positions. But I think we can do that because our mission is different. We're not like a DHERD or Department of Labor and Industrial. Our mission is to preserve and protect these resources, and who better to preserve and protect than those people have a connection, right? So I think we can structure our minimum qualifications and our job descriptions where we can give that kind of, that can be a criteria for employment. So that's one of our attempts. I mean, that's not an entomologist, or that's not someone who comes with some kind of PhD, but we need to attract them when they're younger to take this path because it is a viable economic lifestyle to do that. And then we can start giving them the path forwards, like attracting them through like college, and we'll help pay for, or we'll give you time off. But we first got to create those opportunities for them to stay here and work. So that's kind of what we're trying to do at
So we
DLNR.
can already do some of that because the legislature put money within the community colleges. I mean,
Yes,
job programs.
yes.
So say this like an apprenticeship program, right? So and part of the credit is to in the credit, it can be crafted within the college. So that's the conversation you guys at the department levels have to have with the community colleges, and then attract that, because that also allows for the training part, and then to literally give credit on the job description
Right.
going forward, because one, you gotta get them interested, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
you get the younger generation interested by being, money talks, man, and I mean, I can't even take out the rubbish anymore unless I'm paying the kid. So I'm like, you know what, they get out of the house and take out the rubbish and I get paid to pay rent. But, you know, the program was created with funding for stuff like this, because we know you literally have to put some kind of
Incentivize.
yeah,
right?
incentivize them, so. But the department should take a look at what funds are there
Yeah.
and how you guys are craft them to bring them into. And then, you know, like I said, in every job, you gotta make them fun, because if they ain't fun, they ain't staying, and like you said, people that felt, hey, you know, I never gonna move up in this position. Plenty of us gotta get off our high horse and say, you know what, I might not like you, but you're qualified. And for that reason, but you know, they have this mindset of, I don't like you, so you're never gonna get promoted. But you know, the buck can stop with, but they're, and they have to come to a point where you gotta go down into the different areas of all your different departments and say, hey, we have this conversation because, you have those that are just deadbeats and you have those that are working their butts off to move the department forward. And however you craft the job description and the team gotta go before the heard is what you guys gotta figure out. But other than that, we're gonna keep getting those that are just working their butts off. And then we'll be losing them as whether they age out or they're pissed off enough to say, I'm gone, I don't need this no more. I'll retire and, so. Can you just throw that out there? As you know, we all have our challenges in routine good work, good helpers, and I don't know what all the employees are doing underground somewhere, but there's just a lack of only every place.
Chair, I'm gonna follow
Yes,
up.
no, please go.
To your point about a unified program, I may have mentioned to you before about the Hawaii State Farm Bill. Fills those gaps that the National Farm Bill does not have. And Chelsea and Darcy and Christy had the section with regard to biosecurity. So we put together a Hawaii Farm Bill that has comprehensive ask, and then we'll promote it that way. So it's in the works. Pennsylvania was the first one to do it, and it's been very successful for them. It will do so much for the agriculture if we had a farm bill that everybody buys into. You're not being inundated with support my bill, don't support this person, it'll be one bill. You can look
We're
at.
not gonna get everybody for support. I mean, no, it can happen, but the intent is there. And if the majority of credible people that not gonna be all like this, not like that, you gotta weigh it up on yourself and figure out, do I do the right thing or do I worry about getting 100% fine? I mean, you never get that. So the other issue is that you have a congressional representative in Jutapur that chairs the ag.
Right.
Also, you talked about the federal monies too. Jill has made her rounds here in Hawaii and, aside from her and the other 3 congressional people, there's loaded and you know that the federal money is here, they're like top heavy. It just needs a little electric shock to get these guys digging into the pot and, trying to address the matching funding and stuff that we've talked about. But I mean, there's options and just stuff I'm just trying out there that it is there. You just gotta reach out and grab it.
Anybody on the Kathy Ho or Mary Alice, Rep Lowen, I think Rep Estlin and Rep Senator Gabbard? Any of you guys have any questions or comments? Marta, you good?
No, I just, another thing I can't help but thinking about is DLNR's internal doe care training program.
Yes.
Right, that's another thing we can look at
Mhm.
if there are areas that could be addressed that maybe they don't need a PhD in entomology, but there are,
Right.
certain jobs that we could train within the Department of Agriculture or department. We could train our own for specific skills.
Dog handlers. Yeah, there's a dearth of retired police and military people that have the skill set
Yes.
but they don't have what's the requirement of ag. Was that it? So we want to remove the ag piece
Yeah.
and take advantage of all this expertise that's chomping at the bit to get in there. So there are things we can do, we've thought about, but takes time.
And Senator DeCoite's going to tell us we don't have time.
Next
You
session.
just got to do it. Just got to do it, right? Okay. Anybody else? So I know that Chelsea, this is an action item to act on the recommendations that you've put forward to us. You have those on the board?
Yes, let me put those back up here. And just wanted to provide a comment on the suggestions made by our legislative members that we can make sure to highlight in discussions with the departments as we're reviewing and updating actions in the biosecurity plan to really look into the staffing actions and addressing, how those tracking students into those positions and other mechanisms that were mentioned here today on how to fill those capacities. So let me share my screen.
Okay, oops.
Oh, sorry.
So there are two specific recommendations, submittal recommendations, right? Lori, I'm sorry, do you have any comments? I didn't ask the public or anybody or, the council
Oh,
members.
so engrossed in your guys' conversation. It was good conversation. But wake me up.
Okay, yeah, no, you have questions or comments, please.
Okay, no, just on the submittal,
Yes,
Laurie Buchanan for the record. 8-month timeline for the project. So you have a plan. And then in 8 months, we're gonna get everybody to participate in the planning process. To reassess the biosecurity plan. Okay.
If it helps, Chair, I can read the recommendations and then have Lori provide her comments, just so everybody is aware of them. So recommendations for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council on this submittal is to direct HISC program support staff to work with the relevant agencies and stakeholders to update the interagency biosecurity plan to reflect current needs and prioritize actions across the remaining plan's timeline. And then secondly, commit and direct staff at their respective agencies to participate in this planning process by providing their time and expertise in related meetings and requests for information and input to meet the proposed 8-month timeline for this project.
so, yep, Laurie, did you want to add anything? Yes.
Since the chair is talking about being formal. My name is Laurie Buchanan. I coordinate the Invasive Species Committee on the island of Molokai. And I'm so happy to see my senator here today. I'm really happy. Thank you for coming. And I'm happy to see we have so much other reps and Senator Gabbard, who's been a forever champion for invasive species. I have been aware of the biosecurity plan for some time. We're written into the plan. Mostly I deal with not the border or the border when it's here.
Yeah.
And so that's problematic for me as an invasive species committee because we don't have any enforcement. So that's why we have to work really closely with our community because our community is our eyes and ears. And I really did appreciate the discussion you guys just had, having one that just graduated from the University of Hawaii at age 20 from Scheidler with her bachelor's in business administration and management. And we asked all our kids, what you going to do? So the tourism industry came to Scheidler and pitched all of their Hilton, Marriott, and came to these kids and said, come make a 1-year commitment. So come September, she's off to Maui. They're paying for a relocation, helping her to find housing. If she commits to walk in at a higher level to manage banquet services or whatever. Now, this is a child who was raised in conservation, right?
Yes.
All of her life, because mom's there doing invasive species. She's helping me in the fish pond. But here comes Marriott, along with Hilton and everybody else.
Right.
Brings, offers her an entry pay at $24 an hour plus benefits. And then helps you to go.
Right.
And basically spoon feeding you all the way to just come over here and help us. So that's what we up against.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
And we didn't do a presentation, did we? None of us did.
But I was shocked when she came and she said, oh, and I said, really? And she said, yeah, this is what they offered me. It was 4 pages of an offer to a 20-year-old that made the commitment to go to school and stick to it. And I said, wow, this is what a real job offer look like.
I didn't get a 4-page offer.
I never did either. That's what I mean. We never did. Our generation never did. But here she was. I was like, wow.
You never go Scheidler.
Hard to resist.
Yeah.
Program came on through tourism that has been offered to kids, some straight out of high school and college. Students down
Yeah.
down the line, making sure that the rural areas have an opportunity, which is why, it's important that the understanding of all of these things has impacts on tourism, where the bulk of the money is in tourism, that I said your guys' department needs to come in and say, hey, this impacts tourism. So that money should be moved accordingly,
Yes.
but this like, gotta get more creative about how we utilize this stuff, and as I say, we gotta train our own. So the movement going forward, which was already talked about several years ago, was why are we continuing to hire outside? And I'm going to say this, same thing like what our new athletic director. Again, and I'm not taking favoritism, but Jaron O'Connor, Molokai boy, went out there, wore and played green and white. Played for BYU, played for UH. He's dealing contracts and deal, not to write on him, but what do? We hired outside of him. Guy is fully qualified. He comes with the backing of Mark Cuban guys who coach for Mavericks. And yet, I'm gonna hear it. That is sad. You got our own, that's when Team Chang came back. It's hire your own that have, not to discriminate on the fact that we capable people that are culturally inclined and know exactly what goes on.
You're absolutely right. So
So we have issues within our hiring process. Because if you go back, look, how many people that we've lost through contracts that you may check to out. And all that money is more, because it's not gonna hire somebody else, because the next 3 years of our contract is not gonna be fulfilled. And it's all taxpayer dollars. This is why you have to, like, really understand the cultural sensitivity of the hires of these guys that have left Hawaii to come back to the sacrifice also. Those things are changing, and there's a lot of money in tourism, but it's important that the different areas get involved with the destination manager program, because you will prioritize the type of committees that are there, in this case, are natural resources. So when people don't get involved, say, don't blame nobody but yourself.
you're right. So in 2 years, Senator, DLNR is gonna come to the legislature and say, we're gonna manage this. We're gonna manage.
The whole state.
Destiny, yeah. Because you know what they're doing right now? They're directing them to our state parks, to our trails, but giving us no resources. So
And that's
their
the
money is
But
gonna
you
come to
shouldn't
us.
wait 2 years, you guys should do it now.
No, but you guys already awarded the contract. I would have put up, we
No,
would
I
have
never
put a
awarded the
contract.
contract, HTA awarded that contract, which is why they had a problem.
Well,
Which is why I have a problem.
We need a vote. We need a vote here. We need a vote.
And that was the problem, was restructuring, stop this BS going on.
Okay, that's a conversation. You're right.
Which is
I
later,
don't-
but.
Which
Off
I'm
the
Jackie
record.
Vegas, I'm Jackie Vegas.
Yeah.
But no, but you're absolutely, but I appreciate your comment, Laurie, because you're right. You know what? DOA and DLNR should be excited. And we should be offering those same kids homegrown and say, look, we have opportunities here. But you're right. We as government don't use these vehicles to promote and make space for our own local residents to have upward mobility. But, okay, we're getting totally sidetracked.
I
Yes, we could go on
maybe it's
forever.
the public versus for-profit, the whole corporate thing. I don't know.
But I think we could offer, we could make,
Yeah.
I'm sure your daughter, if she had options to balance, maybe she can stay home at Molokai and help manage, a forestry lands and get paid well.
So Don, you remember before we used to do workforce, I remember the summer programs.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, John was one of them, John Berto.
Yeah.
He was one of them,
I
and
know.
he's still with you guys.
Yeah, no,
So a
yeah.
lot of these guys came in under
No,
the summer
you're right,
workforce
you're-
program. And that's what some of those other monies can be used
So,
for.
no, we
Then
are
you would
looking at that.
gradually, because, so from 9th grade, yeah, I was doing, it was 9th grade, and you could work the summer programs. They don't get incentivized with it, but plenty of our local kids
Yeah.
are working in a lot of
I
these
think
areas.
James is, So that's a
Yeah,
good, James.
Sue.
So I think the Kupu program is sort of like a
Yeah.
training ground for that too. So you're right, but sorry, go ahead, Laurie.
No, I'm in support of the biosecurity plan.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Well, now I know I get extra work because in 8 months, I'm gonna have to be providing feedback or reviewing the whole plan again to the kind, but I like the initiative to go back and say, okay, it's not working so good. So maybe we need to relook at it and reassess and redo it. So thank you to Chelsea and Darcy and Hisk and CGAP's Christy up there. And I mostly came this morning on Mokulele, touchdown at 12:33. Lucky I had my car at the airport.
It was on time.
It was on
I
time.
was early, I left an hour early.
Oh my gosh. Mokulele is a whole nother discussion. Tammy, help us. DOT, help. But anyway, I came especially to ask for help
Okay.
from the department heads for not only the invasive species committee, but for biosecurity, because it affects everybody in the state of Hawaii, and especially with climate change. And on Molokai, I see it every day. Lynn sees it every day. You know, it's really impactful and hurtful to communities, because I hear them say, oh, how come? Oh yeah, we don't do nothing, you know, and that's sad because at least for my staff, they're working their butt off. I mean, today they're out, you know, looking early detection for CRB. And to say that they don't have any enforcement authority or cannot do nothing, gotta leave them to the higher authorities and the powers that be, that's you guys. And so I just here to ask for help in us trying to get there to protect our communities. So our Lahala Weaver doesn't have to have dead Lahala trees and cannot practice their work anymore. So intra-island, you know, ports of entry, yeah, there's like no control. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
No, appreciate.
And thank you for
taking the
being here.
time.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody
Laurie.
on Zoom. Thank you, Christy.
So, do you need, when you say commit and direct staff, is that each one of the department heads? Do you need a letter to come out from the chairs to?
It can be via email. It doesn't need to be a formal designation through a letter unless that's how the departments would like to do it. But yeah, from the council representatives, the leadership that's here today to designate staff from your department to help us do these updates. And I think, you know, the different divisions, so there's plant industry, animal industry for Department of Agriculture. So we'd need a representation from each of those divisions.
Mary Alice, Kathy, do you have any comments to that or any thoughts?
Chelsea, are you looking at the Hawaii Tourism Authority to participate in this update?
So maybe that's a conversation we could have, Mary Alice, offline about how DBEC can participate in implementation of the plan. I make that suggestion in this presentation, but it really is dependent on your department and how we would like to include them in the implementation, if that is going to be as a lead agency in identifying actions. And I think Hawaii Tourism Authority would be definitely appropriate.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you, Chair.
So you're going to take you're doing to meet and propose 8-month schedule. So that's going to take you in the middle of legislative session?
The hopes is that it would be shorter than that. I mean, the original planning process for writing the entire plan in 2016 was a year-long process. It was very intense, but that was done. So I think we can get through, once we get our staff designees, we can work on these updates relatively quickly and on the different agencies' timeline and being cognizant of legislative session.
That would be my recommendation, is to move your schedule up so that we can propose legislative recommendations to implement some of these recommendations.
There goes my summer.
Hey, 1 year to do the biosecurity plan, that was ambitious. But, you know, update, and you guys seem to have done a really good job of sort of doing an initial screening on some of the low-hanging fruits and some of the more difficult questions. But
It's called updating the annual report, and Chelsea and I sitting together and go, this makes sense.
all right. So maybe for input to meet the proposed 8-month timeline or shorter, preferably before the legislative session. Makes sense? Yeah. Yeah, then we gotta wait a whole nother year. Would you guys agree, Mary Alice and Kathy, that, you know, trying to move up, it puts a lot of pressure on staff, but move up the timeline to be before the legislative session, so that if necessary, bills need to be introduced, we've got action by the commission to support those measures by the council.
I'd support that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would too, but that's very ambitious, right? If it's gonna be well, depending on if it's gonna be an part of the admin package, if there's gonna be any legislation, it's pretty ambitious.
Yeah, we may miss the admin bill. So that has to be in by when? August, right? August or September. So yeah. But I think if at least our respective agencies, we could do it as our own bills if necessary. Okay. All right. So do I have any other comments, questions, or do I have a motion? Don't be shy.
Chair, I have a question, point of information. I thought we
Yes.
voted on these two recommendations previously before the presentation and public comments, but you're proposing an amendment. You're entertaining a possible amendment to the second one on the timeline. So would you like to entertain a motion to amend that recommendation number 2, and then we if that passes, we revote on that particular one?
Are you guys comfortable with that, or you want to give yourself flexibility, staff? I mean, you can do it before the 8 months.
I think we can, for our staff and working with the different department staff, we can prioritize working on a legislative biosecurity package for the session. That might not entail the entire review that we need to do, but we can make sure to work with each of the department leads and possibly new department leads on putting together a biosecurity package for our next legislative session, 2024.
Okay, that sounds like a good compromise. So that would be separate and apart from this motion. They could act on a legislative package probably after we maybe approve the budget. Then we can do a briefing. You can do a briefing to us before legislative session on a proposed legislative package, maybe looking at November.
Yes.
I see. Chelsea's nodding her head. Darcy's like, you're not saying nothing. He's just like, I don't know about this, but I see.
Chair, our bills have to be into our director for submittal to the reviewing agencies by September. So
That's what you said.
November would be too late for bills. Budget is also earlier than that for the supplemental budget. So, but I agree that maybe the recommendations as they're worded stand because they relate to the updating the plan. And as you suggested, Chair, a legislative package could be a separate item that Chelsea and Darcy could prioritize as maybe the first part of that discussion with the representatives of the involved agencies.
Yes, I think we've got the key legislators sitting with us on the council. So if we need to, in addition to administratively, we can always ask our representative senators. But yeah, this seems like a lot on your plate. Can do.
We'll make it happen.
Do your best, do your best.
We'll do our best, and we can work with the departments on what they've submitted in their administrative packages to include that in the update, even though it wasn't part of the initial conversation. And then we can kind of fill in the gaps with supplemental bills and maybe legislation we want to work at introducing during the session.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to take the first, well, let's get a motion on the submittal that's before us. So do you have a motion to approve staff's recommendation as submitted?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, I thought I heard Kathy Ho. All in favor of the motion to approve staff's recommendation on item number 6 and 7, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. So it's not on our agenda, but I also heard Chelsea, Darcy, and Christy and your staff looking at putting together a legislative, maybe potential proposed legislative package on priority items based upon the biosecurity plan. When do you normally do the budget review with the council?
That will be scheduled for August. So we'll work on finalizing that date this week.
Okay, that'd be great. So maybe August, and then maybe like in October, November, they'll come to us with the legislative package. So look ahead. Any questions? That's any other comments or questions? Representative Martin, do you have anything else?
No.
Representative Lowen? Anything? Okay. Representative Esmond? Senator Gabbard's office?
No, nothing at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Luke, anything?
Sorry, nothing. I was just picking up my kids here, so walking around.
That's a priority. Senator Dakota, have you got anything else?
Christy did a really good job this year. She heavily pounded the legislature on the ballast. I think the ballast is a big issue. We talk about different ships coming into our waters there. So you guys keep that on the radar. Like put on a side graph. The thing was a big issue and the bill was hurt.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, there's. and
We'll
maybe we
build it
need
in,
to-
Senator.
So I think, on one informational briefing would
Yes,
help.
you're right, you're right.
And then like I said, pictures
Yeah,
gonna be big for that one, because that's a hot issue probably.
yeah. Especially with the veto, right? So, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a really good, and DOTs, they're ready to jump in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tammy.
So I'm gonna.
Because those are probably the biggest groups at the legislature that weren't necessarily supporting the legislation. So I think Senator Dakota is absolutely right. It's an educational campaign, informational.
And there is people that friends on both sides, but the fact of the matter is that's a big issue.
Yeah.
That's an issue that we have all kinds of ships and boats moving in and out of our waters. That she did a really good job. I appreciate her presentation because she had pictures.
It's noted.
I mean, that I had no appreciation for the extent and the scope of how what a vector, how much they bring in. No, and we're not even talking about military vessels, right? We're just talking about those commercial and stuff. Okay, with that being said, I think I've got you overboard for 10 minutes. So no further matters before the council. I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 3:10. Mahalo, everybody.
Thank
you.
Thank you, thank you.